My daughter-in-law's smug grin vanished the moment she read the letter from the bank. She had just sold my late husband's priceless vintage car for $150,000, but she wasn't getting a cent. In fact, after taxes, she now owed money. She called me screaming about a mistake. I simply told her to read the charity clause in the gift papers she'd signed so eagerly. Before we start, don't forget to like this video, comment where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Have you experienced something like this? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Boston, a city that holds as many memories as it does bricks. For 42 years, I shared those memories with my husband, Richard, and this is the story of how a single piece of paper protected my husband's legacy from the very people who were supposed to cherish it. Richard wasn't a man of fancy words or grand gestures. His love language was tangible. It was in the perfectly balanced bookshelves he built in our den, the squeaky floorboard he fixed without me ever having to ask, and most of all, it was in the garage. That was his sanctuary. And inside it sat his masterpiece, a 1966 Ford Mustang convertible. He'd bought it as a rusted-out shell and spent the better part of a decade bringing it back to life. Every weekend, the scent of oil, wax, and determination would drift into the house. I'd bring him lemonade, and he'd show me the new chrome piece he'd polished or the engine part he'd finally hunted down. That car wasn't an asset to him. It was a testament to his patience, a work of art crafted from steel and memory. It was priceless because it was a piece of his soul. When Richard passed away last year after a sudden illness, the silence in the house was deafening. But the silence from our only son, David, and his wife, Chloe, was a different kind. It was an expectant silence. David was a good boy at heart, but he had a fatal flaw. He couldn't say no to Chloe. And Chloe was a woman who collected shiny things. Her happiness was measured in brand names and Instagram likes, and her empathy was as shallow as a puddle on a hot day. They were always in a tight spot financially, despite their fancy brunches and weekend getaways. A bad investment here, a surprise expense there. Richard and I had helped them more times than I could count, always with the gentle suggestion that they learn to budget, a suggestion that went in one of Chloe's perfectly styled ears and out the other. After Richard was gone, the garage door stayed closed. The Mustang sat under a gray tarp, a silent monument to the man I missed with every breath. It took about 3 months for Chloe to start. It began with little comments. "It's such a shame that beautiful car just sits in there," she'd sigh, sighing dramatically. Richard would have wanted it to be driven, to be enjoyed. I would just nod, my heart clenching at the mention of his name. Then the hints became more direct. "You know, Marge, David and I were thinking a classic car would be perfect for our weekend drives. So much more character than our boring SUV." The final push came, as it always did, over a carefully staged family dinner at their apartment. Chloe had made my favorite lasagna, a gesture that was always a prelude to a big ask. After the plates were cleared, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes welled up with practiced tears. "Marge," she began, her voice thick with fake emotion. "David and I were talking. That Mustang, it's the biggest piece of his dad we have left. Keeping it, driving it, it would be like keeping his memory alive, right here with us." She glanced at David, a silent command. He straightened up and nodded. "She's right, Mom. It would mean the world to us. We'd take such good care of it, for Dad." I felt the walls of the trap closing in. They were using my grief, my love for my son, and my husband's memory as leverage. To say no would make me the cruel, sentimental old woman who was letting a precious memory rot in a garage. They knew it. And as I looked at my son's pleading eyes, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. But then I remembered another conversation. It was about 2 years ago, late one evening in the kitchen. Richard was looking over some of their bank statements, a deep line of worry etched on his forehead. He looked at me and said, "Marge, they're not careful. Chloe sees the world as a store, and David lets her shop. If anything ever happens to me, be smart, especially about the Mustang. I know she wants it. If you ever decide to give it to them, do it right. Use the folder in the den safe, the one labeled Legacy." I had forgotten about it until that very moment. The Legacy folder. Richard was a lawyer before he retired. He believed in the power of fine print. So I looked back at Chloe and David, and I forced a small, tired smile. "Okay," I said softly, "if it means that much to you." Chloe's tears vanished, replaced by a triumphant, radiant smile. She jumped up and hugged me so tightly I could smell her expensive perfume. "Oh, Marge, thank you! You won't regret this!" David looked relieved, as if he had just dodged a bullet. I knew in that moment that I was doing the right thing. Not for them, but for Richard. The next Saturday, they came over to the house. I had already retrieved the folder from the safe. Inside was a set of professionally drafted documents, a deed of gift for a vehicle. It looked standard, full of legal jargon about transferring ownership, liability, and title. I spread the papers on the dining room table. "We just need to sign these to make it official," I said, keeping my voice steady. Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement. She grabbed a pen, her eyes scanning the pages impatiently. "Where do I sign?" she asked, not reading a single word. I pointed to the lines at the bottom. "Here and here." She scribbled her name with a flourish. David signed after her, giving me a grateful smile. "Thanks, Mom. We'll make Dad proud." I notarized the document myself, a skill Richard had insisted I acquire and maintain, and handed them a copy along with the keys. Chloe kissed me on the cheek. "We'll take it out for its first spin tomorrow," she chirped. As they walked out the door, I felt a profound sadness, but it was overshadowed by a cold, hard sense of resolve. They hadn't just taken a car. They had taken the bait. For the first few weeks, Chloe's social media was a shrine to the Mustang. Pictures of her and David driving with the top down, sunglasses on, captioned with things like #ClassicLife, #FamilyHeirloom, #keeping his memory alive. It was a nauseating performance. I knew it was only a matter of time. I had set an alert on a few high-end classic car auction websites for any 1966 Ford Mustang convertible listed in the Boston area. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 2 months after they took the car, my phone pinged. A new listing. There it was, my husband's car, gleaming under professional studio lights. The description was glowing, detailing its mint condition and the meticulous restoration. The seller was listed as a private consignment through a local luxury dealer. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't do anything. I just watched. The online auction was fierce. The bidding climbed higher and higher. I saw it close at $150,000. The next day, Chloe posted a picture of 2 champagne glasses on her Instagram story. The caption was simple: "To new beginnings and big moves. Shuck." There was no mention of the car, no sadness about losing a cherished memory. It was just business. The betrayal was absolute, clinical, and complete. And still, I said nothing. I just waited for the bank to do its work. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after the auction closed. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping tea and reading a book, when my phone rang. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a deep, calming breath. "Marge!" she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. There was no hello, no preamble. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" I kept my voice soft. "Chloe, I have no idea what you're talking about. Is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right. The money from the auction, the $150,000. I went to the bank to see why it hadn't cleared, and they handed me this letter. It says the entire sum was wired to some foundation. The Classic Car Restoration Foundation. What is that? This is theft. You stole from us." This was the moment, the one Richard had prepared me for. "It's not theft, Chloe," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "It's in the document you signed. Do you still have your copy?" There was a frantic rustling on the other end of the line. "I don't know. It's somewhere. What are you talking about?" "I suggest you find it," I said gently. "And when you do, please turn to page 4. Look for clause 4B. I believe it's titled the Donation Addendum." The The silence that followed was thick with her dawning horror. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to recall the paper she had signed so dismissively. What addendum? She finally whispered. It's a very simple clause, dear, I explained, taking a slow sip of my tea. It stipulates that if the vehicle, the 1966 Ford Mustang, is sold within a period of 10 years from the date of the transfer of ownership, that 90% of the gross sale price is to be immediately and irrevocably transferred to the Classic Car Restoration Foundation. It was Richard's favorite charity. He wanted to make sure his legacy supported other restorers, not fleeting whims.
90%? She shrieked. That's insane. That's $135,000. What about the rest? What about our money? Here came the final, beautiful, devastating blow. Well, the remaining 10%, $15,000, should just about cover the capital gains tax you'll owe the IRS on the sale of the asset. You declared it as income, I hope. In fact, based on your tax bracket, you might have to dip into your own savings to cover the difference. I'd talk to an accountant if I were you. They can be very unforgiving about these things. The sound that came from the phone was a choked gasp, a mix of rage and utter defeat. My daughter-in-law's smug grin had vanished the moment she read the letter from the bank. She had just sold my late husband's priceless vintage car for $150,000, but she wasn't getting a cent. In fact, after taxes, she now owed money. She was screaming about a mistake. I simply told her to read the charity clause in the gift papers she'd signed so eagerly. Then I hung up. David called an hour later. His voice was strained, caught between anger at me and fear of his wife. "Mom, Chloe is hysterical. There has to be a way to undo this. It was just a misunderstanding." Was it, David? I asked quietly. Did she misunderstand that she was selling your father's car? Did you misunderstand that you were supposed to cherish it? "We needed the money," he blurted out, the truth finally tumbling out. "We were in debt. We thought you'd never know." "She understood she was getting a car for free, David," I said, my voice hardening. "She just misunderstood me. The document is legal, notarized, and binding. My lawyer has the original, should yours wish to see it." He went silent after that, the fight draining out of him. The weeks that followed were a study in social media karma. The celebratory posts stopped. The designer shopping sprees vanished. They were replaced by vague, inspirational quotes about overcoming challenges and the importance of simplifying one's life. I saw a picture of them eating at a fast food restaurant, Chloe looking miserable. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt quiet. One afternoon, I finally went into the garage. I pulled the tarp off the empty space where the Mustang used to sit. The air still smelled faintly of wax and old leather. It felt peaceful now, not empty. On Richard's old workbench was a small framed photo of him, smiling, grease on his cheek, his arm draped over the Mustang's newly painted hood. A week later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. It was from the Classic Car Restoration Foundation. Inside was a beautifully printed letter. They thanked me for the incredibly generous donation made in Richard's name. They told me the $135,000 would be used to establish a new scholarship program for underprivileged young people who wanted to learn the trade of classic car restoration. They were naming it the Richard Miller Legacy Scholarship. Tears streamed down my face as I read it. They were the first tears I had shed since the funeral, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of peace. Chloe and David hadn't sold a car. They hadn't destroyed a memory. Unwittingly, their greed had forged Richard's legacy into something permanent, something that would help others for years to come. They thought they were taking from me, but all they did was give him the one thing he couldn't build himself: immortality. I folded the letter, placed it next to his photo on the workbench, and closed the garage door, finally at peace. Inheritance, I realized, isn't about what you are given. It's about what you choose to build with it.